claim to be a fiscally responsible guy. How does abandoning efforts to provide billions of dollars in financial remedies and just turning this agency into a net cost consumer, how does that help consumers? How does that help America?
We cut the agency in half and returned $400 million that we didn't need to draw from the Federal Reserve.
Sir, you understand that the United States economy actually has a private sector? When you take $3 from consumers to save $1 in the federal government, I'll give you a second, the math don't math.
On July 15th, the House Financial Services Committee brought Russell Vought before lawmakers as acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The argument was bigger than one budget line. Is he restoring discipline to an agency critics call unaccountable, or hollowing out a watchdog Congress created to protect consumers? The cold open gave you the arithmetic fight. Before returning to it, this cut follows two tests. First, New York Democrat Gregory Meeks asks whether an acting director, who is never confirmed, can lawfully reshape the Bureau around a political blueprint. Then Kentucky Republican Andy Barr presents the strongest defense. Congress designed too much power with too little accountability. Listen for what Vought accepts, what he rejects, and what each side counts as consumer protection.
Thank you. Mr. Vought, you've never been a member of Congress, have you?
I have not.
And you were not a member of Congress at the time that Congress created the CFPB, were you?
I was not.
And Congress then made and gave CFPB a statutory responsibilities to protect consumers from unfair, deceptive, and abusive financial practices. So I don't know if you know that, but I was here when it was created. That's the congressional mandate. Now, you took an oath, I guess, as acting, because you had not been or ever been confirmed to be the director. Is that correct?
I have not, and I'm looking forward to being up with my time
But
on
you have not, and
1st of August.
I'm looking forward to that too. But you took an oath of office to faithfully execute the laws that Congress enacted. Is that not correct?
And we've done that.
Not that you've enacted, but that Congress have enacted. And in your testimony, you've said, we've sought to downscale this agency to the maximum extent possible, and I quote. Then you said, you don't believe that the CFPB should exist in its current form, which is the form of which Congress created, not you, or the Dodd-Frank Act, which is still the law. You may not like it, but it is what Congress set forth. Congress has never relieved the Bureau of its statutory responsibilities. So, Mr. Vought, the first thing is, your job isn't to run on a temporary basis, as you have, the CFPB as you wish. It is as the Congress has set out statutorily for it to be done. Your job is to be faithful to administer the CFPB that Congress created. But that's not what you've done, sir. You've accused the CFPB of, and I quote, advancing a radical political agenda. But Mr. Vought, aren't you the creator of Project 2026? And you're trying to put that in place here, which is a radical political agenda? Aren't you doing the exact same things? That's what you're doing? You are putting forward Project 2026, a radical political agenda, and trying to utilize it in the CFPB, which is not authorized by the United States Congress? Sir, under your leadership, the CFPB has dropped enforcement actions, cut its workforce, and made major operational changes. Mr. Vought, your lawyers, and you've done this being a non-confirmed person, and your lawyers have even argued in court that major decisions about the Bureau's workforce and operations should wait, shouldn't be on you temporarily, but your lawyers said should wait for a Senate-confirmed director because they carry greater legitimacy. I mean, your lawyers are actually arguing that you don't have that legitimacy. That's their case. That's what they said in court. It says it's not legitimate when they are made by someone not confirmed by the Senate. So your conduct, sir, is directly inconsistent with the position of your own lawyers of what they took in court. So you described the CFPB as an unserious agency in your testimony. Do you believe that what you and Elon Musk did with Doge at the CFPB reflected seriousness? So that was unserious and not what the American people would expect from their government. Congress never authorized Doge to carry out the CFPB's mission. Congress never gave Doge authority over consumer financial protection. Yet under your watch, sir, Doge gained access to some of the CFPB's most sensitive consumer and supervisory information that I call that unserious and that reckless, sir. Your testimony mentioned several things. I'm out of time, but sir, I'm glad you're leaving. I yield back.
Meeks's case rests on institutional legitimacy. Congress created the CFPB by statute, he says, and its consumer protection duties remain law. He presses Vought on Senate confirmation, workforce reductions, abandoned enforcement, and Doge access to sensitive systems. Vought does not accept Meeks's conclusion, and the exchange does not prove that every management decision was unlawful. What it does establish is the democratic charge in its strongest form. An acting director opposed to the Bureau's current structure may be using temporary authority to make permanent change. Now comes the counterargument. Barr says the same statute concentrated enormous power in one director, insulated from Congress. His question is not whether consumers matter. It is whether accountability and due process protect them better than aggressive enforcement does.
Director Vought, let me offer an alternative perspective from my friend, the gentleman from New York. I wasn't a member when Congress passed the Dodd-Frank Act. Candidly, everyone knows I would have voted against the Dodd-Frank Act had I been here at the time, but I am a member of Congress today. And the fact of the matter is, you're not disregarding the statute. The statute gave you, as the acting director and any director, enormous power, unaccountable from Congress. That was the precise design of the Dodd-Frank law in creating this bureau. And so to the extent my friend from New York has a problem with you exercising the enormous discretion that Congress conferred upon you, it's his fault. It's the fault of the authors of the Dodd-Frank law. That is precisely why we have attached to this hearing a reform package that should be bipartisan. If anyone wants to provide accountability to the Bureau, if anyone wants to rein in your discretion that you have exercised lawfully, it should be the Congress on a bipartisan basis. So whether it's Richard Cordray or Kathy Kroeninger or Chopra or you, sir, we have given to you, my predecessors have given to you in the Dodd-Frank law, all the powers that you are now exercising. So if my friends on the other side of the aisle have anyone to blame for the actions that you have taken, they need to look in the mirror because they have given you the power that you have exercised here today.
Has the gentleman been confirmed by a Senate?
That is precisely why we have offered this reform package today. Director Vought, over the years, many stakeholders have expressed concern that the CFPB's civil investigative demand authority has been exercised with limited transparency and few meaningful procedural safeguards, making it difficult for recipients to understand the basis for an investigation or to challenge overly broad requests before incurring significant costs. Those concerns undermine confidence in what should be a fair and objective investigative process. It's why I introduced H.R. 1653, which would strengthen the procedural protection surrounding the CFPB's use of civil investigative demands while preserving the Bureau's ability to investigate legitimate misconduct. Could you discuss how the CID process was abused under your predecessor and how greater transparency and due process in the Bureau's CID process can strengthen both public confidence in the agency and the effectiveness of enforcement efforts?
Thank you, Congressman. I mean, when you have a financial regulatory entity that views themselves as a prosecutor and advocate, and they have the tools of the civil investigative demands to be able to open up and get any information they want and go on fact-finding missions, which is what the supervision aspects of the job often look like, you have great opportunities for mischief. And I think your bill is the kind of thing that needs to be done to bind the agency. And rarely do you have an agency head that comes to you and says, please bind our agency in as many ways as you possibly can because of the degree to which it has acted abnormally.
Well, under your predecessor, the CID process was a fishing expedition. There was no requirement that they had to actually identify suspected illegal conduct. They just went in and they harassed law-abiding American companies and bankrupted them with this Gestapo tactics. That's why we need my bill and to reform CID and put some modicum of due process into the system. I invite my friend from New York to consider my legislation that would subject the Bureau to the congressional appropriations process. To the extent he thinks you're doing a bad job, again, it's the authors of the Dodd-Frank's law fault because they put you beyond the congressional appropriations process. Could you discuss how bringing the CFPB into the annual appropriations process would strengthen the Bureau's stewardship of taxpayer resources, improve accountability to Congress, and frankly, give my friend, the gentleman from New York, more authority over you?
It's the most important reform that you can do, full stop. The extent to which an agency has to come to Congress and justify the activities that it does in conjunction with the resources that it is requesting from the appropriations process. I do not understand why Congress would ever provide funding to an agency outside of that process. And so it has led to, I think, a cavalier attitude and a swagger on behalf of the CFPB that is ultimately what we've been trying to wind down.
Well, I understand that my friends on the other side of the aisle are disappointed in your leadership. I was disappointed with your predecessor's leadership. If we care about making this agency accountable and less partisan, let's join together in a bipartisan manner and reclaim the power of the purse over this agency. I yield back.
Barr's defense is structural, not personal. In his telling, Vought is using authority the law already gives the director, while Congress should repair the design that made policy swing with each administration. He argues for procedural safeguards, clearer limits, and putting the Bureau through the appropriations process so lawmakers must approve its budget. Vought embraces that funding change and says past supervision pushed beyond statutory authority. That is the strongest answer to the charge of dismantling. Narrower enforcement can be framed as lawful reform, not abandonment. But it creates a measurable test. If dropped cases would have returned money to borrowers, how much consumer relief was sacrificed? Illinois Democrat Sean Casten now moves the hearing from institutional theory to dollars, named victims, and a question Vought cannot answer by discussing organizational design alone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today. I want to just first flag that there's an intellectual inconsistency at the heart of your testimony today. You've said multiple times that the CFPB under your predecessor was a political agency, and you've opposed the fact that Congress specifically made CFPB independent to isolate it from political pressures. You can choose one but not the other. I'm not asking for your opinion on that because your opinion's wrong. We chose to isolate it from political pressures, and we chose that in a political process in the best sense of the word. The job we have is political because balancing equities in a democracy is a political choice. When you drive home today and you fill your car with gas, you will pay the listed price for gasoline, not the price that the gas station thinks you can afford to pay, because we passed a law that protects consumers against the political interests of a more powerful set of players in our economy. You may politically believe that you should stand with bullies against the bullied. You may politically believe that you should favor the powerful over the weak and the merciless over the meek. Those are political choices that you make. We made the CFPB independent to protect us from that.
That's fundamentally
I'm not asking for, I will let you know when I'd like you to speak. Let's quantify some of the pain you have created on our society, because since you have come in, the CFPB has voluntarily dismissed more than 20 enforcement cases that would have returned $3.5 billion to consumers who were ripped off or defrauded. examples of a couple of those. These are all from the CFPB websites. You abandoned a lawsuit against a bank that mistreated seniors and disabled customers. A disabled woman who had tried to get a replacement card on the CFPB website said this left her unable to pay her rent and forced her to take out an $800 loan. You eliminated an order against a credit union that had charged service members, veterans, people who've served our country, who've risked their life for our country, Department of Defense employees with $80 million in illegal fees. One service member said those undisclosed charges were a huge part as to why I had to file for bankruptcy. So my question right now for you as the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, what is your message today to the active duty service members, the veterans, the disabled folks, the senior citizens, the consumers who do not believe they have an advocate in your office anymore? Why should they trust you?
I don't agree with your characterization.
I'm asking what your message is to the people who wrote those messages on the CFPB website and said, I need help.
I don't agree
Do
with
you not care about them?
We go around to military bases. We do this, the financial literacy, all over the time.
Anecdotes are not data. $3.5 billion is data. You claimed a moment ago that the CFPB has been a net cost on society.
Argue against me. And now you're saying that anecdotes are not data?
$3.5 billion is data. All of those cases that were dropped were data. You said a moment ago that the CFPB is a net cost to society, but you know that for every dollar that the CFPB spent, it returned $3 to consumers.
Casten says the Bureau voluntarily dismissed more than 20 enforcement cases that, in his estimate, could have returned $3.5 billion to consumers. He names alleged harms involving seniors, disabled borrowers, service members, veterans, and $80 million in illegal fees. Vought rejects the characterization and points to financial literacy work at military bases. Casten answers that anecdotes are not data, then compares claimed consumer recoveries with bureau costs. The cold open occupied the next half-minute exchange, so it is intentionally omitted here. Vought cited $400 million not drawn from the Federal Reserve. Casten answered that losing $3 for consumers to save one federally did not add up. The exchange resumes with Vought refusing Casten's framework and explaining why his team dropped cases.
I'm not going to concede the framework that suggests that all of the costs being put on by the agency...
That's because you are lying. My goodness. You are smarter than this. You've said previously that the CFPB is a victory for the little guy, all your cuts. Is it your position that the majority of these terminated settlements were initially brought by against mom and pop companies, that you've protected small businesses through your actions?
The majority of these were based on enforcement actions that we did not have the authority or were inconsistent with our guidelines that we have put forward.
Okay, so the beneficiaries, according to Bloomberg, 70% of the beneficiaries from your canceled settlements were firms that had more than $500 million in annual revenue, listed on the S&P 500. That's who you've protected. That's a choice. Last question, the ranking member had talked about some of what happened with Doge. According to court filings, you sent an email granting Doge employees unfettered access to 40 different CFPB systems containing PIA data. That's in the court filings. What role did you play in enabling people to illegally access confidential information with people's social security numbers who were in the CFPB system?
I will say generally, as the director of the agency, I was in charge of the administration being able to do its job at the CFPB.
Feel free to answer that question in writing in detail. Gentleman's time's expired.
The final answer is a collision of definitions, not a settled audit. Vought says most dismissed actions exceeded the Bureau's authority or conflicted with new enforcement guidelines. Casten cites a Bloomberg analysis claiming 70% of the beneficiaries were large companies, then asks who authorized Doge access to Bureau systems. Vought says he was responsible for the administration doing its job. The record therefore supports two conclusions at once. Vought offers a coherent accountability case, and his critics identify specific consumer recoveries they say disappeared. What remains unresolved is whether those dollars were realistic remedies or inflated assumptions attached to cases that should not proceed. That is the real choice behind this hearing: efficient restraint or weakened protection. Subscribe, then tell us: reform or dismantling, and which number should drive the verdict.